Hi guys, welcome back to the Library of Alexandria. So today I'm going to be reviewing, you've seen this book already because this is an omnibus edition with all 4 books, but today I'm going to be reviewing book 2 of the Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham, and that is A Betrayal in Winter. So the last time, book 1 is A Shadow in Summer, and this takes place in the same world but 14 years later, and we have 2 of the main characters from that previous one back to play a part in the second book. So remember, these books take place on part of a continent, and these cities, these loosely collected, like Asian-inspired cities, are called the Kayam, and each one is ruled by a Kai, which is essentially king. And each city has its own poet, and the poets are the magic users. There's very little magic in this. And the poets have the power to bind an abstract idea through a very complicated series of words or verse that essentially becomes a contract, creating a humanoid life, binding this abstract idea into a humanoid life. And in the last one, it was removing the part that continues, aka seedless, and he was used in the southern city of Sarakat to remove all the seeds from the cotton plant once they were harvested, saving them time and giving them this massive advantage in the cotton trade. While Sarakat was a summer city in the south, all of the action here takes place in Machi, which is the northernmost city in the Kayate, I guess. And Machi's poet and andat is used for the mining industry. I know, guys. Now, I know that sounds boring.
What? No.
But I really like how these magical beings, these bound spirits, are used for economic purposes. I don't really remember reading any books that focus so much on the economy of rule, not just the politics of rule. We've seen politics of rule, and that this has a lot of that as well, but the economy of what it takes to keep a city going and afloat and trading with its neighbors. We see a bunch of trading houses, and we also see some of the nobles that don't even want to be king in kind of the vie for power, because they're like, I'm richer than the king and I have more freedom. So why would I want to do that? And that's just really, really interesting. And so the andat of Machi is called Stone Made Soft. And you can see how its powers are used. The miners find a vein of ore, and the poet has to use the andat's powers, channel it to soften the stone around the ore to make it easier to achieve, but they have to do it without making the supporting cave so weak that the whole thing collapses and kills everybody. The Kayate, these cities of the Kayam, there used to be an empire, and the empire fell when the andat were weaponized. Because just like how seedless could remove the seeds from the cotton, and Stone Made Soft can help to gather ore, their powers can also be used on a weaponized scale. Seedless, if thrown against an enemy nation, could literally, remember, removes the part that continues, or the seed. He could remove the fetus growing inside any woman in the vicinity. So he could just, like, all of a sudden, boom, all of its enemies, all the pregnant women, done, gone, right? And Stone Made Soft could level mountains. It could just turn mountain into just mud, bring mountains down on people. And so when that happened, that's how the old empire fell. So the andat are supposed to be used for just economic purposes and not militaristic purposes. And that's why, again, in this one, we see the Galts, that the Kayam are Asian-inspired, kind of like quasi-theocratic nations where everyone's kind of under the Dai Kvo, which is the main poet. He's kind of like the Dalai Lama, I guess. But the expansionist ones that have steam-filled war machines, they're the Galts. They're the more European-based ones. And they targeted the cotton trade and seedless in Sarakat in the first book to try to weaken the Kayate's cotton trade so that they could get an advantage. And so the Galts, if they're going to, the only reason they haven't tried to take over the Kayate is because of the andat. They're afraid of the andat. And so they're trying to influence events. The Galt are just always there trying to influence events, but without being found out. Because if they're found out, they run the risk of a ticked off Kai turning its andat on the nation of Galt. So that's really kind of the undercurrent. So here in Machi, our two main characters from the last one, we have Mati, who was the failed poet. He was a kid, 16 back in the first book, studying under the poet there, and he had a lot to do with Seedless. But we also have Ota, who is the sixth son of the noble family of Machi. But the culture that's built up in the Kaiate is that all of the Kai are succeeded by their sons, but only by one son. It is understood and lauded. It's almost entertainment for the city. When the Kai dies, his sons are going to murder each other and try to take the throne. It's never passed to the eldest, it's passed to whoever survives. And that's just understood how it's going to be across kind of the empire, the Kaiate or whatever. Any sons they don't want involved in that, like if it's like bunch of sons on down the line, they send those to the poet school to learn how to be poets and eventually control the andat. And when they graduate from that, they get a brand, and the brand marks them as unable to take the throne, meaning that they're not going to be murdered in the succession wars. Well, in Shadow and Summer, we saw in the prologue, Ota gets ticked off about how cruel and manipulative the poet masters are, and he leaves the school, goes and becomes a laborer, takes a different name, but never got the brand. The back of the book, the plot of this one is that the Kai in Machi is dying, and his oldest son is murdered, and everyone thinks that it's this sixth son who was known to have fled the poet school, but no one's heard anything from him then. Ota, all of this is pinned on kind of the bogeyman Ota, that he's pulling all the strings and all this death is coming from him from behind the scenes. And so this is a story of nothing but political intrigue. It's very, very similar to a Shakespearean tragedy. And guys, you will feel the weight of this grief and just the tragedy in this political succession story. We've seen political intrigue, and that's nothing new. The vying for the throne thing is nothing new, but the way Abraham handles this, it's less about the scheming and about who's going to succeed and more about the price. Long price Quartet, remember. A Shadow in Summer was about the price of justice and the price of love. And we have those here again, the price of justice, the price of love. But here we also see the price of power and the price of killing. When you kill, when you are a murderer, even if you're a hardened criminal, the price and the toll that exacts upon you. So it's all about the human cost of loving someone, the human cost of betraying someone. Seedless from Shadow and Summer draws this really salient conclusion between love and injustice, talking about how if you love someone, you are more likely to forgive their crimes and sins than if you didn't. He uses the example of, Seedless for all of his plotting and Machiavellian nature is being held responsible by Mati, the poet, because he doesn't like Seedless. Seedless is unpleasant. He doesn't like him, but he forgives the crimes of his teacher Ota, of his mentor Ota, because he loves Ota. And so he talks about this link between love and injustice, and that here is at the core as well, the link between love and injustice. So after Ota's oldest brother is murdered, the Dai Kavo sends Mati, the failed poet from Saraket, to Machi to kind of be on the lookout for Ota, because he's the only one that knows what Ota looks like, because Ota's been in hiding for really for over 20 years, really. And so he's supposed to hide out, because the Dai Kavo thinks that it's Ota who's killed his older brother. And so Mati is dispatched to identify him, turn him in, come home, and redeem himself from some of his shame from 14 years earlier. Ota goes because he is currently a career involved in this really cool idea of the gentleman's trade.
The gentleman!
The couriers are not just delivering messages, they're also supposed to read the city. They know where to get the best gossip, which gossip to believe, what kind of rumors are kind of have the kernels of truth, which are false. They know how to decipher codes. They know how to unseal and unsew letters and then sew and seal them back without detection. So it's really kind of this espionage spy work. And the house that he does that for has no real foothold in the north. And so his boss sends him up north because he's good at his job to try to kind of take the pulse of the city and try to get in good with whoever the new Kai is going to be, since the old one's dying, and give his house a foothold there. And so that convergence happens and plot ensues. I am going to spoil who actually killed the brother. And it's not really that big of a deal because this happens in chapter 1. You find out in chapter 1 who actually did it. So it's like 20 pages in. Because I cannot talk about everything I want to talk about in this book without you knowing who actually did it. Because the star of this book and the real brilliance in Abraham's work here comes from the character of Idahn Machi, who is Otah's sister. Abraham deals with so many issues of gender in this book and what is expected of women, what's expected of women, of noble women. Idahn is such a fascinating character. I don't think I've ever read a more just compelling but repulsive, deteriorating female character than in Idahn. And she is so relatable, and you can understand where she is coming from and why she sets these horrific events in motion. You can understand that while at the same time being disgusted and reviling her. She's a horrible person, and it really should be said, guys, that most of the characters in here are not very likable. Just like in the first one, Abraham does not write likable characters, but they are meaningful characters and understandable characters. But I don't think you'll like any of them, really. They're all kind of unpleasant in their own way. So Idahn is Lady Macbeth, but more sympathetic. Lady Macbeth, but Idahn she's that, but more sympathetic. So, in the world of the Kai, she is a noble woman, and in that she just feels powerless and trapped by the inequity and the inequality between men and women. When she starts her treasonous activities, she wonders maybe it would have been different if she had ever been called to account for anything. She could do whatever she wanted, and her dad was always like, oh, Idahn, never punished her, never held her accountable for anything, never put anything on her because nothing was expected of her. She was expected to marry someone, to seal a political relationship with her house. That's all that was expected from her, and to produce babies for that house. That's it. She's angry. She's so angry because her brothers get to choose who they marry. She is sold off to whatever is politically expedient. She's angry that when she's going to marry her husband, she's trying to kill off all the successors so her husband can be the new Kai, because that's the only way she can get power. She will never be able to hold power for herself because she's a woman. They're not going to do it. But she's angry that while she is expected to produce her husband's children and only sleep with her husband, if he is the Kai, will be expected to have many, many, many wives. So sealing all of these political alliances. She's enraged that when the succession wars happen, her brothers can kill their brothers and it's celebrated. But if she's ever found out for killing anybody, she'll be executed immediately because there is this huge discrepancy between women and men. In fact, from the ancient empire, during the wedding ceremony, the first line that no one even can speak except for the poets is translated, "It is a woman's job to serve her husband." And she's so angry. She's ambitious and she just turns into a megalomaniac. She is just such an interesting character because you understand where she's coming from. You feel bad for her. And as she starts doing this, it is such a realistic portrayal of the price and the toll that this kind of evil takes on a person. She starts regretting it almost immediately, and you see her struggle with continuing the plan. She's trying to be powerful where even her husband and her co-conspirators are failing, but she knows that she has to because she's committed now, and if she's found out, she'll be killed. And yet, she just regrets, she feels dirty, she feels disgusting, she can't feel clean. She even ends up taking a lover that is outside the whole conspiracy for the sole purpose that he makes her feel clean. He gives her some kind of redemption so that her whole being isn't tainted by what she's doing. It's not who she is. She doesn't want to be known as this, but she knows that this is who she has become. And she taints everything around her, and she just kind of struggles with this. It even infuriates her that even as people are trying to figure out who killed her brother, no one ever considers that she did it. Even when the evidence could point her way, it is so, you feel for her. You're yelling at them like, guys, it's Idahn, it's the girl. But it's so ingrained in the culture that even the people trying to figure it out, educated people who are intelligent, and it's right in front of them, they can't pin it on her because it doesn't even begin to occur to them that a woman could be behind this murder. And you feel for her, but she just goes off the deep end. And what a brilliantly drawn and just unlikable character that Abraham has created in Idahn. So sympathetic. And so through all these political machinations with Idahn and with Ota and Mati and the poet who controls Stone Made Soft, I think his name is Samai, there's just so much. It's a really, really well-drawn example of real politics. Stuff happens the way it really would. You see economic favors and horse trading for other favors to kind of get power because this house isn't quite powerful enough to do anything on their own. And so you just get an inner working of that, and you also see the toll that it takes of how paranoid the conspirators get. We get to see that paranoia, and I've never seen it really on this kind of scale. You're like, oh, will we get caught? And they're like, no, we'll be fine, and then that's it. But no, these people are paranoid. And if you've ever done anything wrong and been paranoid of being caught, and you can't stop thinking about it, and then every action that anyone takes, you read into it, oh, they know. There's a lot of that here. And it's just really just tense to watch. And even as the doors start to close and they just start raging at each other, there's just these really quiet, just brilliantly realized moments where even in the worst of circumstances, they start reminiscing about when times were good, or these really specific memories they have when people loved each other. They're just these really quiet, brilliant moments. And this book, again, its climax is again this explosively quiet, intimate climax where someone has so much on their shoulders and they have to decide. It's a literal decision between who they're going to betray. There is no other option. You are either going to betray the one that you love, or you're going to betray your country. And that's where that love versus injustice. If you betray your country, you're not doing the right thing, and you're doing it because you love somebody. But if you want justice, you gotta let this person go. It is just so tense and powerful in that scene. It's so good, just as good as the first one. And so once again, Abraham has created this really, really compelling yet tragic story filled with sorrow, but filled with real characters, real people that aren't very likable. We're seeing them really kind of at their worst. And he's just built this fascinating world, and you know war is brewing. The andat are fascinating. I wish we could get more of the andat. They're just so passive because they are at the same time separate yet identical to their masters. They have all of their masters' strengths and weaknesses. And even if they're placid, like Stone Made Soft, first of all, reminds me of Rex from Mass Effect.
Rex? Shepard?
If you ever played Mass Effect, he reminds me of Rex because it says that his voice and laugh and whatever sounds like a landslide or crunching gravel. So I just picture him as Rex, but he's just this big dopey guy that walks around, but at every opportunity, he, just like Seedless, hates his master and wants to be free, and so looks for opportune times to try to undermine the poet so that he can go free. And it's just so fascinating. What an original, awesome system of magic, and I can't wait to see more andat and what they do and how they're going to be tied into trade as well. I like trade. Some other themes we have running through is Ota's belief, and Idahn's really belief, that this traditionalism that the Kai have will be their downfall. Ota doesn't believe that it's the right thing to do for the brothers to just murder each other to take the throne. He also believes that women should have some kind of better role than they do, so he's much more progressive, and Idahn as well, even though they don't like each other at all. Ota is kind of far-seeing. He sees that they're not going to be able to stand up to the inevitability of Galt if they don't quit weakening their country by murdering everybody. So there's kind of that rolling around. What is family? Is family the people that you know and that you've met? It's a debate versus found family versus, what family you're born into. Ota doesn't know these people. He has no dog in the fight of his brothers dying. He doesn't love them. He doesn't know them. And Abraham does it all with really beautiful prose it's hard to describe, but it's just sorrowful. It's very mournful prose. His prose just feels like a sad violin playing. And that doesn't really make any sense, but if you've read it, you'll understand. In addition, before I actually finish this review, it must be said that there is a wasp bomb in this. Someone throws a wasp nest wrapped in a cloth that explodes into wasps. Why are wasp bombs not more prevalent in other fictions? And I hope in the war they have wasp bombs on a much, much larger scale. On the Kingfin approval system, I give this easily an excellent book. I also give it 4 out of 5 stars. This is just as good as the first one. It's different, but just as good as A Shadow in Summer. If you have not picked up the Long Price Quartet, I hope that this encourages you to do so. I didn't actually spoil anything in this review. That is everything I talked about in this review kind of happens in the first chapter. So please pick it up. You will be surprised. You'll see the grief coming and it will just weigh on your soul. And I cannot wait to see how this series plays out in the last 2 books. Guys, thanks for watching, and as always, I will see you next time.